When her husband tore down the house, she just laughed. The truth behind it will break you. When my husband tore down the very house we built together, I couldn't stop laughing. Sounds insane, right? But if you knew the truth, you'd laugh too, and maybe cry. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of how everything I thought was solid in my life turned into dust and broken. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. At one time, I thought I had it all. A husband I trusted, a life I was proud of, and a house that felt like a dream come true. I met Mark when I was 26, and we fell for each other quickly. He was charming, funny, and always had big plans for the future. He made me believe we were unstoppable as long as we stayed together. For a while, I thought that was true. After a couple of years of dating, we decided to buy a house. We didn't want something brand new and perfect. We wanted something we could build together, a fixer-upper that would become our shared project. It was exciting, messy, and exhausting, but every broken tile and every coat of paint made me believe we were creating not just a home, but a life. Mark had a way of talking me into things. He was confident and persuasive, and I often trusted his judgment without second-guessing. When it came to signing the papers for the house, he told me it would be simpler if everything went under his name. Less paperwork, less trouble down the line, he said with that easy smile of his. I didn't think twice. I loved him, and I trusted him. That was enough for me. For a while, everything seemed fine. We worked during the day, and in the evenings we painted walls, fixed leaky pipes, and laughed about how neither of us really knew what we were doing. On weekends, we'd collapse on the couch, covered in dust and sweat, but happy. I told myself this was what marriage was about, working side by side, building something out of nothing. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I ignored the small cracks. I ignored how Mark sometimes brushed off my ideas about the house, how he'd say, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," as if my input didn't matter. I ignored how he controlled most of the money, always telling me not to stress. I told myself he was just being responsible, that he cared about us, that this was his way of taking care of me. Looking back now, I see those signs differently. But at the time, I was just a wife who believed in her husband and in the home we were building. I thought we were creating something permanent. I thought nothing could shake us. I was wrong. To everyone who saw us from the outside, Mark and I looked like the perfect couple. We had steady jobs, we supported each other, and we shared the same vision of building a future together. People often said how lucky I was to have a husband like him. I believed it too. We worked hard, saved every dollar we could, and finally bought a fixer-upper. It wasn't glamorous or ready to move into, but to us, it was more than enough. We dreamed of raising a family there, filling it with love, and making it a place where we would grow old together. The house was supposed to be the foundation of everything we planned for the future. Mark was the one who usually took charge when it came to financial decisions. He always carried himself with confidence, and I trusted him to know what was best for us. When it came time to sign the papers for the house, he told me it would be simpler if everything went under his name. He explained it as just for ease of paperwork. He said it would avoid confusion, and that it didn't really matter since we were married and shared everything anyway. At first, I hesitated. It felt strange to put something so big entirely under his name, but he reassured me with that calm, convincing tone he always used. "Rachel," he said, "we're a team. This house is ours no matter what the paperwork says. Don't stress about technicalities." I wanted to believe him. I loved him, and I thought love meant trust. So I signed nothing, and the house was officially in his name. I told myself it was fine, that he had our best interests at heart. In those early days, it felt like everything was falling into place. We spent our evenings fixing up the house, working side by side with paint on our hands and dirt under our nails. Mark always had a big smile after finishing a project, and I matched his excitement. I believed this was what marriage was supposed to feel like: partnership, teamwork, building a dream together. Still, there were moments that didn't sit right with me, little things that seemed too easy to ignore. When I asked about some expenses, Mark would brush me off with, "I'll handle it, don't worry." When I suggested a few changes to the house, like colors or layout, he'd quickly shut me down, saying, "That won't work," or "Trust me, I know better." Those moments made me pause, but only for a second. I told myself not to overthink it. After all, we were happy, weren't we? We had a house, plans for a family, and what looked like a perfect life. I ignored the red flags because I believed love and trust were stronger than doubts. I convinced myself that everything we were building was solid and unshakable. But those cracks I chose not to see would one day tear everything apart. At first, life in the house felt like everything we had dreamed of. But slowly, little cracks began to show in our marriage, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. Mark started spending more and more time away from home. He told me he was working late or that his boss needed him for extra project. At first, I believed him because he always sounded so confident when he explained. But soon, the excuses piled up, and the late nights became normal. I often sat alone at the dinner table, waiting, while the food went cold. It wasn't only the hours he kept. His behavior at home began to change too. He wasn't as talkative as he used to be. He seemed distracted, often scrolling through his phone with a half-smile, only to shut it off quickly if I walked by. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I felt something wasn't right. Then came the lies, small but clear. He would say he was stuck in traffic, but I knew the drive didn't take that long. He'd say he ate at the office, but I'd find no signs of him having dinner when I checked later. They weren't big lies on their own, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. One evening, my friend Jenny came over. We had known each other since college, and she was the kind of friend who always told me the truth, even if it hurt. She sat me down and looked uncomfortable, as if she was carrying a weight. Finally, she said, "Rachel, I saw Mark the other day. He wasn't alone." My heart dropped. I asked her what she meant, and she told me she had seen him at a restaurant with another woman. They weren't acting like co-workers or friends. She said they were sitting too close, laughing too much, looking at each other in a way no married man should look at another woman. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe Jenny was mistaken. I even got upset with her for suggesting it. "Maybe you're wrong. Maybe it was just a client," I said, even though the fear in my stomach told me otherwise. After that, the uneasy feeling grew stronger. Every time Mark walked through the door late, I wondered where he had really been. Every time he turned his phone face down on the table, I thought about Jenny's words. But instead of confronting him right away, I pushed it aside. I told myself I couldn't jump to conclusions. I wanted to believe that my husband wouldn't betray me. I wanted to believe that our marriage, our home, our life together was still what it seemed. I ignored the truth that was slowly standing right in front of me. But the day would come when I couldn't ignore it anymore. The doubts I had pushed aside could no longer be ignored. The signs were everywhere, and soon the truth stared me right in the face. One evening, Mark came home later than usual. He looked tired but also strangely nervous, like he was carrying a secret. When he went to shower, he left his jacket on the chair. As I picked it up, a folded hotel receipt slipped out of the pocket. My hands shook as I opened it. The date was recent, and the charge was for a room for two. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the ground had been pulled from under me. For a few seconds, I stood frozen, staring at the paper, hoping there was another explanation. But deep down, I knew this was the proof I had been avoiding. Later that night, when Mark fell asleep, I reached for his phone. My heart raced as I unlocked it. The first thing I saw were messages from a woman named Lena. The words were clear and cruel. "I can't wait until you're free from her. Last night was amazing. Our new life is going to be perfect." My chest ached as if every sentence was a blade. I scrolled through more texts. They weren't just flirty or careless. They were the kind of messages that showed this wasn't a fling. This was a full relationship. They had been seeing each other for months. He had given her promises. He had given her the parts of himself that were supposed to be mine. The next morning, I confronted him. I placed the receipt and the phone on the kitchen table and looked him in the eye. "How long has this been going on, Mark?" He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he sighed, as if I was the one making his life difficult. "Rachel," he said, "you don't get it. You've become boring. With Lena, I feel alive again." His words cut deeper than the betrayal itself. I had spent years building a home and a life with him, and in one sentence, he dismissed it all. I asked him if our vows, our house, our plans for a family meant nothing. He shrugged. "Things change. People change. I can't keep pretending I'm happy when I'm not." In that moment, the man I thought I knew was gone. He didn't apologize. He didn't fight for me or for us. He chose her. I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to let him see me break. I quietly gathered myself and walked away from the table. The marriage I thought was strong had ended with a receipt, a phone, and the cold truth from his mouth. It was the moment everything shattered. After that morning, there was no turning back. Mark didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer him a second chance. The marriage was broken, and divorce was the only path left. At first, I thought the process would be painful but fair. We had built our lives together, and I assumed we would divide things equally. But I was wrong. That was when the real betrayal revealed itself. When the lawyers got involved, I learned something that shook me. The house, the very one we worked on day and night, was not mine at all. Legally, it belonged only to Mark. My name wasn't on the deed. My signature wasn't on any official paper. Everything was in his name because years ago, I trusted him when he said it was easier that way. The truth hit me hard. I had put in the money, the effort, and the dreams. Yet, on paper, it was all his. I remembered the nights we stayed up fixing broken pipes, the weekends we painted walls, and how I thought we were building a future together. Now, All of it was being ripped away from me. When I confronted him about it, his face was cold. "You knew the house was under my name," he said flatly. "It's mine to do with as I please." I reminded him that we both worked and saved for it, that I had spent just as much money and sweat as he did. But he brushed me off. "Rachel, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You'll be fine. Find a new place." Then he dropped the final blow. With no hesitation, he told me Lena would be moving into the house once I was gone. The home I helped build, the one that was supposed to hold our children and our future, was going to be handed to his mistress. It was like being erased. Not only was my marriage ending, but every piece of effort I put into that house was being stolen. I was losing my husband, my home, and the life I thought I had secured. I cried alone that night, not because I still loved him, but because of the betrayal. I had trusted him completely. I had believed in us so deeply that I never thought I needed to protect myself. And now, because of that blind trust, I was left with nothing. But beneath the heartbreak, something else began to grow. Anger. Quiet, steady anger. He thought he had won. He thought he had left me with nothing. But I wasn't going to let the story end that way. I didn't know it then, but losing the house would become the spark for everything that came next. After the divorce talks, Mark grew bolder, almost arrogant. It was as if taking the house from me gave him a new sense of power. He stopped hiding his plans with Lena and started bragging about their future right in front of me. One day, I overheard him talking on the phone. His voice carried through the hall as he said, "We're not just moving in. We're tearing this place down and rebuilding it from the ground up. This will be our fresh start." Those words hit me like a hammer. The house that had been my dream, the one we built together, was now something he wanted to destroy. To him, it wasn't enough to push me out. He had to erase every trace of me. Soon after, contractors started showing up. Trucks parked in the driveway, men with tool belts walked through the rooms, and the sound of drills and hammers filled the air. Walls I had painted, floors I had sanded, and spaces I had carefully decorated were being ripped apart without hesitation. I stood outside one afternoon, watching as they smashed through the kitchen walls. The kitchen where I had pictured family dinners was now a pile of dust and splintered wood. My chest felt heavy, but I didn't cry. Something inside me shifted. Mark noticed me standing there and smirked. "Don't look so sad, Rachel," he said. "This place was never really yours. Lena and I are making it better. You should move on." His words burned, but instead of breaking me, they fueled something stronger. I realized that he wanted me to feel small, powerless, and defeated. He wanted me to see everything I had worked for being erased, so I would walk away crushed. But as I stood there, listening to the crash of walls and the roar of machines, my emotions changed. I no longer felt like the victim. I felt anger sharpen into clarity. If he wanted to tear the house down, I would let him. If he wanted to believe he had won, I would let him think that too. Because while he was busy destroying everything on the surface, he didn't know what I had kept hidden. He didn't know the proof I still had of all my contributions, or the legal details buried in the paperwork he had overlooked. Watching the house fall apart didn't break me. It gave me a new kind of strength. The home he thought he had stolen was about to become the trap he had set for himself. And when the day came, it wouldn't be me crying. It would be him. While Mark spent his days bragging and tearing the house apart, I began working quietly in the background. He thought I was powerless, but he didn't know what I had kept all these years. I had saved every receipt, every transfer, every bit of proof showing how much I contributed to the house. Every paycheck I put toward the down payment, every bill I paid for materials, every purchase for repairs. I had it all in a folder. Back then, I only kept them out of habit. Now, they became my strongest weapon. I also went back to the mortgage paper. That's when I found something Mark had overlooked. Because of the way the loan was structured, the bank still required my signature for refinancing or rebuilding. The house might have been in his name on the deed, but without me, he couldn't move forward with any major changes. He had no idea that the fine print tied me to the foundation of the property. I took my folder to a lawyer. She studied everything carefully and then smiled. "Rachel, you have more power here than you realize," she said. "He can tear down walls all he wants, but he can't rebuild without you. And with the receipts you've kept, you can prove financial interest in the house." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't completely erased. I wasn't as powerless as Mark wanted me to believe. I didn't tell him what I knew. Instead, I stayed quiet and let him carry on. He paraded Lena through the half-demolished rooms, promising her a brand new house once the old one was gone. He called himself smart, ambitious, a man moving on to bigger things. I listened from a distance, never letting him see the truth in my eyes. There was satisfaction in watching him dig his own hole. Every dollar he spent on contractors, every wall he tore down, every plan he bragged about, all of it was wasted. He didn't know that soon everything would come to a halt. When the legal notice finally reached him, I wasn't there to see his face, but I could imagine it. He thought he had full control, but suddenly the contractors had to stop. The permits couldn't go through without me. His project was frozen, stuck halfway in destruction. That was the first real taste of revenge. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and precise. He had tried to take everything from me, but instead, he trapped himself. And I wasn't finished yet. When the notice reached Mark, everything changed. The contractors he had hired packed up their tools and the half-demolished house stood frozen, walls broken and floors ripped apart, but no work could continue. He stormed into my lawyer's office, furious, demanding answers. That was when he learned the truth. He couldn't rebuild, refinance, or sell without my approval. The fine print in the mortgage agreement tied his hands completely. All the confidence he had shown, all the smirks and cruel words vanished. Now he was the one caught in a trap. The house he had tried to claim as his own was nothing more than a ruined shell that couldn't move forward. I didn't have to lift a finger. I only had to watch as his plans fell apart. The money he had spent on demolition was gone. The future he promised Lena was slipping away. Everything he thought he controlled was crumbling, and he had no way to stop it. Lena didn't take it well. I heard from a neighbor that she came by one afternoon, shouting at him in the driveway. She had expected a fresh start, a beautiful new home, and a perfect life. Instead, she was stuck standing in front of a half-destroyed building, the dream reduced to rubble. Their arguments grew louder each day. What had once been his secret love affair now became his biggest problem. She demanded answers he couldn't give, promises he couldn't keep. The same charm that once fooled me and won her over no longer worked. One evening, I went to see the house for myself. The air was heavy with dust and broken beams leaned against the wall. The kitchen was nothing but exposed wires and cracked concrete. The living room where I had once dreamed of putting a Christmas tree was nothing but empty space. And I laughed, not out of joy but out of freedom. The house that was supposed to destroy me had turned into his cage. Every brick, every shattered tile, was proof that he had ruined himself. Mark saw me standing there and glared. "This isn't funny, Rachel," he snapped. But to me it was. He had torn down our home thinking he was wiping me away, but all he had done was expose his own downfall. Lena didn't last much longer after that. She realized she had tied herself to a man with nothing to offer. Soon, she was gone, leaving him with the mess he created. The house of lies had fallen apart, and he was left standing in the ruins. When Lena finally walked out, Mark's world collapsed. The woman he had given up everything for was gone, and all he had left was a half-destroyed house that no one wanted. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he tried to fix things with her, but she refused. She didn't want to live in rubble, and she didn't want to stay with a man who had no plan left. She had believed his promises, but once the lies caught up to him, she was gone for good. That was when Mark came back to me. Not with love, not with regret, but with desperation. He showed up one evening, standing on my doorstep, looking worn out and defeated. "Rachel," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it, "we can fix this. We can rebuild together. We can start over." For a second, I just looked at him. This was the same man who had once told me I was boring. The same man who had thrown me aside for someone else. The same man who had tried to erase me from the very house I helped build. And now he wanted me back, not because he loved me, but because he had nothing left. I shook my head. "No, Mark, you made your choice. And now you're living in it." He tried again, pleading, saying that we had history, that the house could still be saved, that maybe Lena leaving was a sign we belonged together. But his words meant nothing anymore. The love I once had for him was gone, replaced by clarity. I told him I wasn't going to rebuild with him. I wasn't going to rescue him from the mess he created. "You wanted to destroy everything we had," I said. "Now you can stand in the ruins alone." His face tightened with anger, but beneath it, I saw the truth. He was scared. He had lost everything because of his own choices. After that night, I stopped answering his calls. I cut off every tie that remained. I no longer wanted to be connected to his chaos. Mark was left with nothing. No wife, no mistress, no family, no home. Just broken walls and empty rooms. And for me, it was the first time I felt truly free. The betrayal had crushed me once, but now, seeing him beg and fall apart, I realized I was stronger than he ever imagined. The aftermath of betrayal didn't destroy me. It destroyed him. After I walked away from Mark for good, I felt a strange mix of emptiness and relief. The house, the marriage, the future I once imagined, all of it was gone. But instead of breaking me, it gave me a clean slate. At first, it was difficult. I had to start over in a small rental, far from the home I once called mine. There were nights I lay awake, thinking about the years I had wasted and the trust one had given to the wrong person. But over time, those thoughts stopped feeling heavy. They became lessons instead of wounds. I realized that the house was never really my security. It wasn't the walls or the paint or the mortgage that made me safe. It was me. I was the one who had worked hard, saved money, and kept everything together. I was the one who built a life out of nothing. Losing the house didn't erase that. If anything, it showed me what I was capable of surviving. Friends and family supported me, reminding me that I had a future beyond what I had lost. Slowly, I began to believe it. I started focusing on myself, putting energy into things that made me feel alive again. Simple things like cooking new meals, taking long walks, or even just sitting in silence without feeling the weight of his shadow over. I didn't rush into anything new. For once, I wasn't living for someone else's dreams. I was living for myself, and that felt powerful. Sometimes I drove past the old house just to see it. It stood there half-ruined, silent and empty, a shell of what it was supposed to be. Mark had stopped the work long ago. No contractors, no laughter, no future. Just broken beams and dust. The first time I saw it like that, I laughed. Not because I was happy, but because the sight finally made sense. When he tore the house down, I thought he was tearing me down too. But the truth was different. The house was never my prison. He was. And watching it crumble was watching him lose everything. Now, when I think of that laugh, I understand it better. It wasn't madness. It was freedom. It was the moment I realized I wasn't trapped anymore. I may have lost the house, but I gained something bigger. My independence, my strength, and a life that belonged only to me. Mark was left with rubble. I was left with a new beginning. And in the end, that was the real victory.
Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.